Number 10. Batman's inability to trust. For a superhero with no powers, Batman is able to do remarkably well against much more powerful villains, and is able to stand next to some of the most powerful heroes in the DC universe without looking out of place. And while yes, technically you could count the fact that he's susceptible to being shot or stabbed as a weakness, his greatest weakness is his inability to trust anyone, even his closest allies. Batman is constantly finding himself in situations where he doesn't give his allies the full picture, and as a result, he or his teammates are put in unnecessary danger. The most famous example of this comes from the Tower of Babel storyline, when it was revealed that Batman had developed detailed plans about how to destroy each of his friends and teammates. Ra's al Ghul managed to steal these plans and do a lot of damage to the heroes before Batman realized what was happening. Frankly, it is only through dumb luck that none of the League members were killed in this incident. When the dust settled, the team was furious with Batman for breaching their trust and putting all of them in danger. As the writer of the story, Mark Waid, recently said in an interview where he talked about this arc, Batman's sin to the Justice League was not that he had these plans to counteract each of them. It was that he didn't tell them. If he had just said to Superman, "Listen, just in case you want to know, I have a backup in case you ever go nuts," Superman would go, "Awesome, that's good to hear." This is a lesson that Batman has yet to really absorb, despite the amount of times his secrecy has blown up in his face, such as when he kept the Batman Who Laughs prisoner under the Hall of Justice without telling anyone. Number 9. Zatanna has to be able to speak. Zatanna is a stage magician who happens to be capable of real magic. She is capable of casting powerful enchantments that can range from turning enemies into rabbits or erasing their memories. She casts these spells by saying what she wants backwards. For example, when she wants to turn rain into flowers, she says Niar Semo Keb Suru Wolf. The one limitation on this power is that to cast these spells, she has to be able to speak the incantations. So, unlike other magic-wielding characters like, say, Doctor Strange, who could cast a spell by wordlessly waving their hands, if someone manages to gag Zatanna, she is incapable of doing anything to further defend herself, as happened when she was captured by the Joker, who slit her throat and threw her into a water tank. However, she was eventually able to heal herself by using blood magic and writing the spell backwards in her own blood. Number 8. Daredevil's radar sense gets confused. When Matt Murdock was a young boy, he was hit by a truck that was carrying a radioactive isotope. This isotope got in his eyes and blinded him, but also heightened his other senses, allowing him to develop his trademark radar sense, which helps him navigate the world and fight crime as Daredevil. While this does give him several advantages, it is also prone to being overstimulated by kinda random things. For example, if he ends up underwater, he can easily lose his bearings and have trouble telling up from down. Even worse though is his weakness to rain. This weakness is kinda inconsistent, as in other versions of the character, like the Ben Affleck movie, rain allows him to see things more clearly, but in the comics it is a serious handicap for the character. In issue 25 of the 2011 Daredevil series, Matt is fighting a villain named Ikari who has a similar radar sense. The fight leads them to a sporting goods store where Matt's narration reveals that he has always been worried that a villain will someday think to use a sprinkler system against him, as rain negates his sense of smell, overwhelms his hearing, and makes his radar sense practically useless, cutting his by 95%. Considering how often it seems to rain in Marvel's New York and how dependent Daredevil is on his radar sense, this is a pretty rough weakness. Number 7. Black Canary if she gets a sore throat. Dinah Lance is the second hero to use the alias of Black Canary, with her mother being the first. While her mother was limited to being a capable hand-to-hand fighter and being able to train canaries to do amazing feats, her daughter has the ability to unleash the powerful canary cry. How she manages this varies depending on the continuity, with it sometimes being a byproduct of a wizard's curse, and sometimes being due to her carrying the metahuman gene. But what the power does remains consistent. The canary cry allows Dinah to control her vocal cords to generate a powerful sonic attack that can deafen her opponents, and when she really lets loose, can destroy metal and even kill people. However, she needs to be in good vocal health to achieve this, and if she ever has laryngitis, she is unable to unleash the canary cry. However, even without the cry, she is one of the best martial artists in the DC universe, so she still manages okay. Number 6. Wolverine's metal skeleton. Wolverine has always been a powerful mutant sporting claws and a healing factor that makes him practically unkillable. Between that and his super acute senses, his more than a century of combat training, and his berserker rage, he is not someone you want as an enemy. These abilities got an upgrade when the Weapon X program got a hold of him and coated his skeleton and claws with an indestructible metal called adamantium. adamantium. While this does make him even more durable, it does come with certain drawbacks. For example, it does make it much more difficult for Wolverine to swim, and foes often take advantage of this, trapping the clawed Canadian underwater and making him experience the feeling of drowning until he manages to escape. The other drawback to this, of course, is that it makes him vulnerable to magnetism. While this wouldn't be too bad of a weakness for most heroes, I mean, how often do you really come across a giant magnet in the world? Wolverine has the misfortune of being a member of the one superhero team that is constantly fighting against a character who is able to manipulate metal with his mind. At best, this makes him immobile for most of the encounters against Magneto, and at worst, it results in him getting his skeleton torn out. Number 5. Snowbird can't leave Canada. When the Inuit goddess of the Northern Lights, Nelvana, needed an agent on Earth to help prevent the return of the evil mystical great beasts, she mated with a human and had the shaman, Michael Two Young Men, use his magic to help deliver the child on Earth. Naria was given a decent grab bag of powers, the most notable of which is the ability to transform into any creature found in the Canadian Arctic. She has used this power to become owls, bears, and even whales, which makes her a formidable force against her enemies. However, due to Shaman not being specific enough when casting the spell that bound her spirit to the land, she is somewhat limited in where she can go. If Snowbird goes or is taken beyond the Canadian borders, she grows weak and sick. The longer she is out of Canada, the weaker she gets, and if she stays out of the country too long, she could even die. This weakness was discovered in Alpha Flight number 12 when the team learned that their leader, Guardian, had walked into a trap set by the evil Omega Flight in New York and teleported to his location to try and save him. Snowbird immediately became emaciated and old and nearly died, and was therefore more of a hindrance than a help in this scenario. Snowbird died in a later comic and was eventually brought back, and as a result, this weakness seems to have disappeared, as she has since traveled outside of Canada and has even left the planet without any ill effects.
Coming in at number 4, we've got MODOK. This one might seem obvious, but it's worth mentioning. MODOK, or a mental organism designed only for killing, was once an ordinary man. George Tarleton was a skilled technician who ended up joining AIM. He knew they were a little radical, but not to the extent that he found out later on. The organization altered George into a super intelligent being, which made his dome grow to unheard of sizes, and then realized they should probably give him a way to move around. Thus, the Doomsday Chair was born, carting MODOK around by levitating. He would think circles around everyone, using his brilliant mind, and even had psionic powers, but if he's rendered chairless, it's game over, or if someone turns his power off.
Number 3. Domino suffers from electorophobia. Nina Thurman has the mutant ability to subconsciously manipulate probability when she finds herself in stressful or dangerous situations in order to give herself the best possible outcome. In simpler terms, she's extremely lucky. If she is shot at, she will instinctively know exactly the right way to duck and dodge her way past the bullets, or the enemy's gun might simply jam. She can make the highly improbable happen in order to survive almost any situation, and it has made her a very difficult character to defeat, but not impossible. In Deadpool Volume 4 number 17, the Merc with a Mouth is planning on assassinating one of the X-Men's most vocal critics in order to earn a place on the team. The X-Men of course do not want to be embroiled in this kind of scandal and send Domino to deal with Deadpool. She ties him to a bed and the two talk, with Wade confessing that he is terrified of cows and Domino revealing that she is terrified of chickens. You'd think she was kidding or lying, but later in the issue when Deadpool escapes and goes after the target again, Domino and Wolverine chase after him only to be taken out of commission when crawling through an air vent when they end up face to face with a chicken. Domino is paralyzed with fear and unable to continue on, which delays her and Wolverine long enough for Deadpool to get away. Considering how much poultry seems to affect her, Domino is lucky she doesn't come across them more often. Number 2. Mon-El and Lead. One day when Superman was just a young Superboy, he looked to the sky and saw a crashing rocket. He intercepted it and discovered a young man inside with a locket from Clark's Kryptonian parents, Jor-El and Lara Lor-Van, wishing him luck on his travels. The young man had suffered amnesia, but the fact that he had the same powers as Superboy led Clark to deduce that this was his long-lost brother from Krypton. He named him Mon-El, and the two began fighting crime together while enjoying their newfound sense of family. However, Superboy soon became suspicious of his new brother, as Krypto didn't seem to recognize him, and his belt was made from a metal not found on Krypton's periodic table. As he did a lot Not in the Silver Age, Clark began putting Mon-El through a series of elaborate and convoluted tests to prove he was an imposter. He took a bunch of lead balls and painted them green before throwing them into space. He then went to a nearby planet with Mon-El to play baseball. When the green balls showed up, Superboy pretended they were kryptonite meteors and pretended to be affected. When Mon-El also began acting sick, Clark took this as proof that he was an imposter, but as Mon-El's amnesia wore off, he revealed that he was actually from the planet Daxam and had met Jor-El on his travels. As a Daxamite, he had the same powers as Superboy, but really did have a vulnerability to lead. While a Kryptonian would return to full health when kryptonite was removed, a Daxamite exposed to lead was doomed to a slow and painful death. Superboy was forced to put Mon-El in the Phantom Zone until he could find a cure. Mon-El has had a few adventures since then as a member of the Legion of Superheroes, but the fact that he could be killed by a relatively common element is pretty dumb. Number 1. Aquaman gets dehydrated. As the son of a human and an Atlantean, Arthur Curry is capable of some pretty astounding feats. He is able to survive underwater and swim at incredible speeds. He has super strength and expert fighting skills, as well as the ability to control the oceans when wielding the Trident of Poseidon. Oh, and he can also talk to and control fish, an ability that might seem lame until he attacks you with a megalodon. However, he also has a weakness that is pretty silly. If Aquaman doesn't go back in the water every hour, he begins to grow weak and dehydrated. The severity of this weakness depends on who is writing the comic and what continuity you're in, but the Silver Age version of this character was particularly vulnerable. A great example of this is in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 115, when Jimmy developed the same powers as Aquaman. A villain impersonating Superman was able to trick Aquaman and Jimmy into entering a competition where they stayed out of the water for an hour and then crawled through the desert trying not to die, as the fake Superman taunted them with a pitcher of water. For those wondering, Jimmy won the competition and was made the new King of Atlantis. After they defeated the villain, he ceded the throne back to Aquaman, but the fact that Jimmy beat him in a nefarious but fair competition, and by rights is the true King of Atlantis, makes you realize why Aquaman has so much trouble being taken seriously.
Number 10. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is generally known for being one of the most powerful and most iconic heroes out there, but even he has his weaknesses. In fact, while many of them are not as famous as he is, some of them are pretty ridiculous, including his weakness to ethyl chloride, something that also slows and weakens spiders in the natural world. So if you were ever wondering if there might be a bug spray that you could use to fight against Spider-Man, the answer is actually kinda yes. Although make sure you bring a big spray can of ethyl chloride, as he is a lot bigger than your average spider. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you are loving what we are doing here at Top 10 Nerd, why not hit that subscribe button? It really helps us out and you get more of our content, so yay! Number 9. Superman. Superman is a character that we generally associate with strength, but not often weakness, which is interesting considering that he actually has quite a few weaknesses, probably the weirdest among them being magic. The best way to defeat Superman would simply be to become a magic user, because against them he becomes kinda powerless. When it comes to the explanation for why, a lot of people's theories surrounding this have to do with the fact that Superman's powers are naturally occurring, not magic based themselves, although this is usually used as a means to weaken him in the comics, as he doesn't have a natural means to defend against magic, and it's one of the few things, like kryptonite, that his invulnerability does not protect him from. In fact, narratively speaking, this is likely why he was made weak to magic to begin with, to help give him more to struggle against as a character, as he's kinda OP usually. Number 8. Rogue. Rogue was one of my favorite characters growing up, and I think what I loved about her so much was the tragedy of her story and her powers. But what's even more, I love the way that Rogue overcame them. Still, this would be a terrible weakness to have, or have had, so that's why I'm including Rogue on our list. Rogue's powers allow her to adopt the powers of whoever she comes into physical contact with, actually taking their powers for herself, basically draining them. But that's not all Rogue takes with her touch. She can also take your memories and drain your life force. Or, at least, you know, she could do that. Rogue has since overcome this weakness by facing her fears. As it turns out, it was her own subconscious that was basically making it manifest. Number 7. Wonder Woman. One of Wonder Woman's original weaknesses seems to be in line with what she represents as a character: female power and strength. As an Amazon, Wonder Woman was initially also susceptible to losing her strength and power if she was ever restrained by a man. While some might see this as kind of a sexist weakness in the comics, I would actually see it as kind of being the opposite. To me, it's more meant to symbolize a history of oppression against women and its consequences. At least, that's how I see that weakness. However, regardless of any greater meaning behind it, it was also a pretty silly weakness in the sense that it made Wonder Woman fairly easy to defeat under certain circumstances, and if she was going up against men, because if they just found her bracelets, that's kinda it. So I do have to say I'm glad this is no longer a rule for her in the comics today. Number 6. Nightcrawler. Well, Nightcrawler is a super powerful character overall, and an iconic and amazing character as well. He isn't actually the most powerful teleporter. This has to do with his weird restrictions and weaknesses surrounding teleportation. The big one being that he can only teleport by a max distance of about, I believe, 2 miles at a time. The other main one being the more that he teleports, the more exhausted he gets, and Kurt as a teleporter can tire fairly quickly if he's forced to make multiple jumps, which if he has to go far, he kind of has to do because each jump he can only go so far. Kurt does teleport through the Brimstone dimension, which I saw some people in the comics bringing up as like a super powerful thing, but this is actually more how his teleportation skills work. It's not necessarily something he's choosing to do, as he has to travel through the Brimstone dimension to get where he's going. So while yes, he can travel interdimensionally, it's only one dimension, and it's not really by choice, it's more by design. However, Kurt is an amazing character because of his limitations. That's what makes him so great. It means that when Kurt has to push it to save the day, and he often of course does just that because he really is a hero, he's often putting his life on the line for ideals he believes in, or for all of Earth or all of life itself, whatever he's defending. That's why we love Kurt. Number 5. Green Lantern. Hal Jordan is Green Lantern, or one of the Green Lanterns anyways, and as a Green Lantern he has a pretty iconic and ridiculous weakness, or at least for a very long time in the comics he did have that weakness. Hal had a weakness to the color yellow. In fact, all Green Lanterns did for a while. This was as a result of parallax existing within the Green Lantern Corps' central battery. Having the entity of fear within the battery caused all Green Lanterns to develop a weakness to yellow, something that was used in All-Star Batman and Robin and Frank Miller's alternate reality to weaken and torment Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. In the All-Star Batman and Robin comic, Batman and Robin basically paint themselves and an entire safe house yellow, just to teach Hal a lesson about meddling in Batman's affairs.
Number 4. Martian Manhunter and his addiction. John Jones is an alien from the planet Mars who has insanely strong telepathic powers that allow him to read and control minds. He also has super strength and the ability to shapeshift, and the ability to become intangible and phase through objects, making him a very difficult hero to defeat. For many years, Martian Manhunter had a psychosomatic weakness to fire that would cause him to lose the use of his powers and be burned. This weakness is kind of a problem when you consider how many superhero battles result in buildings or cars catching on fire. But what I want to focus on is a lesser known weakness, his cookie addiction. In Martian Manhunter Volume 2 number 24, we learn that John has developed an intense love of Choco's cookies, the DC equivalent to Oreos. When Blue Beetle and Booster Gold decide to play a prank on him by stealing his cookies and buying all the Chocos in a mile radius, we learn that when Martian Manhunter goes too long without his fix, he becomes a mindless Hulk-like creature who angrily smashes up the city, screaming about how he needs his cookies. His rampage isn't stopped until Booster Gold and Blue Beetle lead him to a warehouse full of Chocos where he greedily begins to devour them. Once Manhunter is back to normal, Batman discovers that the chemicals in Chocos, though relatively harmless to human biology, are extremely addictive to Martian physiologies. So yeah, fire is a bad weakness, but a cookie dependency issue is way worse.
Number 3. Green Lantern. Alan Scott used to have a hilarious weakness, similar to someone else on our list actually. Let me know in the comments when and if you figure out who I'm talking about here. Alan Scott had a weakness to wood. The explanation for why and how this weakness developed was explained later by the fact that Alan was snuck up on and basically attacked using a wooden club, sort of, and as a result he subconsciously manifested this as a weakness of his, due to him mistaking it for one when in reality, it just hurts to get smacked by a piece of wood, because that just hurts. Thankfully, Alan Scott has overcome this, and this strange weakness that was actually originally tied to being the hero Green Lantern in the comics no longer bothers Alan, or any other Green Lanterns for that matter. Number 2. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is a super interesting character. On one hand, she's extremely powerful and can never lose. She can even potentially have her power utilized to manipulate the stakes of other competitions that she's pulled into. However, this also implies that there are times when she has zero control over her powers, in the sense that she cannot influence the result of an unbalanced battle. In fact, her powers will pull her to serve the side that will be victorious, regardless of whether or not she wants to, in terms of what her mind or her heart is saying to her. This has meant that Iska has been forced to turn her back on her own people, the mutants of Arakko, through more than once. She has also had to fight against family, colleagues, and friends before as a result. Although the one thing she can control at times is kind of how she approaches the fighting part of, the battle. Meaning that if she has the option, she can try to fight others involved as opposed to those that she is specifically close to. Like during her fight against Planet Araco and the Great Ring, when she was teleported away to the planet's ocean by Nightcrawler and chose to stay there fighting the planet's creatures in the name of Uranos and the Eternals, as opposed to fighting her own people directly or continuing to fight them directly. Number 1. Power Girl. Power Girl probably has one of the weirdest weaknesses around. Despite being a Kryptonian who is on the level of Superman when it comes to her powers and her strength, she can easily be harmed simply if you use organic materials to hurt her. You know that saying about sticks and stones, which may break your bones? Well, for Power Girl, despite having super durability and invulnerability, this is true. Sticks and stones could break her bones, but industrial steel probably wouldn't hurt her for some reason. Raw organic materials, which have been unprocessed, are revealed to be a weakness of Power Girl's in Supergirl issue number 16 from the 1996 series. Power Girl shares this revelation with her alternate self from the main continuity at the time, who was shocked by the revelation. Which, I mean, fair enough, I would be too if I were Linda Danvers, who was Supergirl at that time. However, I will say I don't think that Kara has this weakness anymore in the comics, thank goodness, but in the 90s, it was a thing, and it was there for some reason.
Coming in at number 10, we've got the Riddler. Of all the supervillains throughout the universe, the Riddler is one of the most consistently interesting. He's an excellent foil for Batman, the world's greatest detective. By setting up intricate puzzles and riddles for Mr. Wayne to solve, he provides all sorts of intrigue. Edward Nygma, what a name by the way, isn't terribly physically strong, nor does he have any sort of energy beam ready to fire. He's just extremely good at deductive reasoning and is able to plan very far ahead using his vast knowledge of eclectic things. He could probably be a master criminal if he wanted to, pulling off heists like no other without ever coming close to being caught. Unfortunately, he has a major weakness. He wants people to solve his riddles. He wants to be found. He's compelled to leave clues behind, pretty much no matter what. There could be a clean getaway right in front of his masked face and he'd still find a way to leave behind some sort of tip for the folks looking to solve this crime. Really, anytime the Riddler loses, it's his own doing. You have to feel sort of bad for the guy at this point. I'm sure it was fun at first, but now he probably just wants to make a clean getaway and write some mystery novels or something. Maybe someday, Edward. Maybe someday. Coming in at number 9, we've got Thanos. Believe it or not, Thanos has a similar weakness to the Riddler. Sure, he's a gigantic purple powerhouse of a supervillain with a drove of committed lackeys that have crazy powers of their own, but he still fails in the same way as Mr. Nygma. Well, almost the same way. Throughout his various reigns, Thanos manages to take down countless heroes, even without the full power of the Infinity Gauntlet. He's got size, strength, speed, and mastery over all sorts of disciplines. Really, there's no reason for Thanos to fail at whatever he puts his mind to, but he still does somehow. It seems as though he believes that he's unworthy of his own power, therefore making subconscious mistakes and leaving openings for others to thwart his plans. So even if his weakness isn't apparent to those trying to bring him down, he'll lead them to victory somehow. Wow. Coming in at number 8, we've got the Penguin. Remember kids, smoking kills. The Penguin is another villain from the Batman universe who really doesn't have any superpowers per se. What he does have though is ruthless business sense, endless funds, and a whole lot of crazy technology. Plus he's based on a penguin. Incredible stuff really. His genius level intellect and surprising combat skills make him a formidable foe for sure, and that's not even counting his birds. But there's one thing that brings this flightless lad down. It's not an allergy to some sort of supernatural element, nor is it a proclivity for melting when exposed to heat. It's a self-inflicted wound. The Penguin has a weakness for cigarettes. That's right, death sticks, coffin nails. Didn't his mother tell him it was a terrible habit? I suppose he didn't like his parents too much to start with, but still, if there's one weakness that is extra terrible, it has to be one for smoking, even if it is through one of those fancy long-handled opera-style holders. Coming in at number 7, we've got Venom. Eddie Brock has had a rough go, hasn't he? The poor guy lost everything, decided to blame it on Spider-Man, and then got bonded with a symbiotic alien. Well, at least he got some wicked powers out of it. He's got all sorts of superhuman physical abilities, as well as the ability to block out Spidey's spider senses. Add in night vision, venomous fangs, and of course shape-shifting, and you've got a powerful villain slash anti-hero slash whatever else Venom decides to do. But alas, there are a couple of rough weaknesses that make this symbiote hunter a little less effective than he'd be otherwise. Firstly, there's the fact that fire, or really any form of intense heat, really does a number on him. Even a match could prove to be a little too much for poor Venom depending on the circumstances. Fire can be more or less avoided if you're careful though. His other weakness is a little more omnipresent. It's sound. Loud noises can take out the big lad. It really disturbs the alien. And Venom seems to operate largely in New York City, which isn't exactly known for ever being quiet. Tough break, big guy. Coming in at number 6, we've got Electro. Spider-Man, you've got it too easy. All your enemies have weaknesses that are super exploitable. You'd think that a man who can harness the power of electricity would do well, especially in a big city, but it seems as though his spirits are easily dampened. Get it? Hold on. So Electro can generate all sorts of electricity, which is extremely useful when he weaponizes it. He can also propel himself along with electromagnetic energy and even teleport by turning himself into electric current and jumping into wires. That all sounds super great, right? Like, it's nice to be Electro, but it's too bad that water can essentially stop him in his sparky tracks. There's the old idea that electricity will travel quickly through water, electrocuting anyone in contact with the liquid. Well, I mean, when it comes to Electro, water will just short circuit him. Womp womp. This wouldn't be too big of an issue, but Electro lives on Earth, you know, the planet covered in water. Coming in at number 5, we've got Red Hulk. After a lifetime of hunting the Hulk, General Thunderbolt Ross decided it was time to take matters into his own hands, his own red hands. Assisted by AIM and the intelligentsia, he becomes a Hulk of his very own, this time more crimson than green, and then he sets out to find and fight the Hulk. The more power he draws, the hotter he gets though, so as he goes harder in the paint, the more likely he is to overheat, and if that happens, it's game over. I suppose that's a weakness most people have. If you fight too hard, you're gonna pass out, but the Red Hulk takes it to a brand new extreme.
Number 4, Black Cat. Black Cat is an anti-hero over at Marvel Comics, who is generally known for being an ally and sometimes romantic partner of Spider-Man. While she typically is shown as being a skilled thief with acrobatic skills and superb training and experience as a fighter, at least that's how she was depicted initially, she doesn't usually have any superpowers to speak of. However, at one point, she did just have straight up powers, and this happened for Black Cat when the Kingpin granted her wish of getting them. However, because this was the Kingpin, it of course did not work out exactly as Felicia had planned. She ended up with bad luck powers, which were extremely useful when fighting an enemy, but not so useful when with an ally or anyone else, as they actually affected not just her opponents, but like anyone who was close to her, which means that Peter suffered from them as well. To make matters worse, Felicia kept her powers a secret from him, which ended up driving a wedge between the two when it came to their romantic and working relationships with one another.
Coming in at number 3, we've got Harley Quinn. Another genius with an Achilles heel, but Harley's really has nothing to do with her own limitations. She's just a sucker for love. Or manipulation if you look at it objectively. The Joker, while serving time on Arkham, managed to brainwash poor Dr. Quinn. He broke her down and built her back up in his image. She's super smart, super resourceful, and super popular, but she's always got this thorn in her side, Mr. J. When your weakness is an over-dependent relationship with a gaslighting lunatic clown man, you know you've got it rough. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Joker. Speaking of lunatic clown men, wow, who would have guessed? The trickster of Gotham, the prince of pranks, the maniac who causes a lot of problems for everyone. He manages to outsmart and outplay all sorts of powerful folks through sheer ingenuity and madness. Because beyond all those crazy gadgets and brainwashed lackeys, the Joker is just a man. And men are weak to bullets, or knives, or being punched through the chest. Finally at number 1, we've got Kingpin. And speaking of men, Kingpin loves his wife a lot. Like, enough to make some major mistakes. She does not approve of his criminal lifestyle, but finds herself involved anyways. So when you look to all of the other villains with tragic backstories and Achilles heels the size of Achilles himself, you have to wonder how Kingpin feels. Ask him about his weakness and he'll respond, "My wife."